Welcome pilots, my name is Hybrid V and I just wrapped up my play session checking out the new Nyx system in the Evocati test build that will hopefully go to Wave 1 very shortly, but as it stands right now, I can only talk about my experience, I cannot show it, so everything that you're seeing on screen here is all just going to be just random stuff me and the Forgotten Heralds got up to over the last couple of weeks, just to kind of fill things in, so if you have something you want to look at, it's going to be there, but for the most part, I recommend you just put me on in the background and just have a listen to my experience as I describe the new Nyx system, Delamar, and Levski. Now, a lot of you old heads probably already know this, but if you're newer, I just want to kind of explain the history before I talk about my experience. So, in 2020, I think it was around 3.9, and prior to that, I think it was as far back as 2018, if I recall, we had Levski, because Levski was our first ever landing site when they introduced in 3.0 planets and moons. More specifically, we just had moons, really, that's all we had. And then we had Delamar the planetoid with Levski on it, and it was moved to the Stanton system purely for testing purposes. It was not meant to be actually there permanently. And I do have some old screenshots I want to showcase of the old Levski, mostly because these screenshots are collecting a lot of dust and I do want to show them off, and mostly also to show you what it used to look like so you can have a little bit of a comparison. I didn't take a whole lot of pictures back in those days because I didn't care too much about documenting things. They were just kind of whatever I decided to take in the moment, but I do want to show it anyway, as I do want to have a little bit of a comparison. Now, jumping into the PTU, CIG did give us the option to spawn directly into Levski if we wanted to, but I wanted to do something a little bit different, and I decided to start in the Pyro system because I wanted to jump from Pyro to Stanton to Nyx, because temporarily, at least right now, currently in the PTU, the Magnus jump point was changed to the Nyx jump point. That's not supposed to be finalized. I don't know if that's going to be how it's going to go when we get Wave 1 and we go into live. Maybe they're just leaving this for testing. Maybe it's going to be like this for the foreseeable future until they eventually put in Magnus and then they rejig all the jump points. Don't know, but the way you're supposed to technically get to the Nyx system is from Pyro to Nyx, and then Nyx is kind of a central hub. It has a lot of jump points to like different areas in the region. But anyway, I wanted to see how long it would take for me to go from Ruin Station all the way down to Stanton, go across from Stanton and head to the Magnus jump point and take it to get to Nyx. And all the while I went through with my 400i, it took about 30 some odd minutes to get through, and that was after refueling after I got to the Nyx system and I went to the station that was on the other side of the jump gate, and I quickly just refueled. So even after all that and then finding my way to actual Delamar was about 30 some odd minutes, probably a little bit longer depending on the type of ship you're using, more than likely. So yeah, pretty substantial amount of distance. If you had to do some type of interstellar commerce, whether using like a whole sea or something like that, it could take quite a bit of time. Obviously there's faster ways of doing it, but still wanted to try it. But anyway, what I noticed when I was going through the jump point initially is that the jump point, at least currently as it stands in the Evocati build, is a bit of a copy and paste job of going from Stanton to Pyro. So right now when you go through it, it just has the normal blue coloration and then it switches to like the Pyro orange and then you come out. So obviously that is not finalized. It's all placeholder. And of course the one in Stanton is not even finalized anyway. It's supposed to be the Magnus jump point. So we'll see what that evolves into much later. Alright, once I exited the jump point, I was completely lost because, of course, it's Evocati, so things were completely broken. There was no map that I could use to readily see what was around me, as well as no quantum markers were around me that were functioning. I eventually figured out I could just get out of the seat, get back in, and I had some markers, but I only had markers for the Pyro jump gate and the Stanton jump gate. I didn't have one for Levski. I later found out through a little bit of testing that I was able to jump to Levski, it just didn't have a UI marker. So once I figured that out, I was able to jump straight to it, and I was absolutely blown away by what I saw. It was beautiful. Delamar, the kind of proto-planet, kind of asteroid that sits in this asteroid belt, it's called the Glaciem belt, if I recall correctly, off the top of my head with my lore memory. And it is sitting in that belt, and that belt looks absolutely gorgeous. You have the star of Nyx, and it's shining the light through the belt, and the belt is creating this kind of really deep blue and kind of aqua tone, and it's just very beautiful. And the music that hits you is absolutely beautiful as well, too. We have this very, very beautiful kind of like synth pads, these beautiful synth strings So Pedro is absolutely knocking out of the park. It really gives you this feeling of serenity and calm as you glide amongst all these rocks. And there are tons and tons of rocks in this area. A lot of them are actual rocks that are just kind of like floating, and there's just tons and tons of them. There's huge patterns, and then you have some in the distance that are kind of like two-dimensional, but they kind of make it feel like these other rocks are moving much faster off in the distance. And it just feels very serene and calm as you glide amongst the rocks in this belt. And it's just beautiful. And like I said, that those deep blues and that aqua lighting is just really gorgeous. And it kind of changes a little bit as you start getting closer to Delamar. It kind of goes from that deep blue and aqua lighting to kind of a more pale blue that we're kind of used to. And the old Delamar was a little bit more kind of like a grayish kind of tone. It was really nice, but it was very gray. And this one, we have a lot more blues. It feels very underwater-esque. That's the best way I could describe it, especially when I was doing EVA later, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But yeah, it has this kind of almost underwater feel to everything, and it's really gorgeous. As I started getting close to Delamar and Levski, the performance started to really tank. Now, the PTU always has poor performance because there's tons and tons of logging CIG does in the background, which causes your CPU to work a little bit harder, and it causes your frame rates to tank, especially since Star Citizen is very CPU bound as it is currently until we get Vulcan in. But anyway, beyond that, once I crept over the rock of Delamar to get to the side where Levski was on, the view was absolutely stunning. Like I said, the colors were gorgeous. The music had this real serene vibe. But I could see on radar all these players coming and going. You can see the borehole immediately. You can see the exterior area where all the hangars are. There's even external pads, which is a really nice touch. It kind of reminds me of like how Port Olisar was designed, right? Port Olisar had those exterior pads because we didn't have internalized hangars quite yet. And a lot of people kind of miss having external pads for landing sites and stuff like that. And this definitely had a lot of external pads and elevators that you could take to get into the central area of Levski without ever having to take a hangar. So it's kind of a nice touch. I kind of like that design philosophy. So as I got closer, I couldn't help myself. I had to just race through the borehole because it goes all the way from one end to the other. And you can go in from the top where the hangars are, and you can go all the way to the bottom. And that is actually where the Hull Cs can actually dock and offload their cargo. And it was really fun flying through. Other players were flying with me. I was dodging players going the other way. And it was just really cool. I quite enjoyed it. It was just a fun experience. And then as I got around and turned around and went back up the borehole and went towards the hangars, I realized, I looked around, I was like, man, this is going to be great for watching players do their takeoff and landings, because it is just so, for one, everything is so centralized. It's so easy to see players coming and going. I can see players landing on the exterior pads. I could see players landing on the smaller hangars. And I can see larger ships making their way to the larger hangars. And even though they're slightly further out, I can get to it all very easily. There's nothing super crazy. It's not like, for example, like Orison, where everything is so incredibly decentralized, it can be very difficult to see players coming and going, especially players taking off. One thing I always hate is how it's hard for us to see players taking off, even from observational decks. In Levski, that is not even an issue. Like, you may not have the best window views in the house, but you can literally just go out there in EVA and float, and you'll just see players coming and going, and it's so easy and incredible, and it's so beautiful to watch. Anyway, once I got my fill of the sites, I landed on an external pad and got out and was able to see all these other players EVAing and exploring. And also what was really cool was the sound design. You could hear the sounds of the machinery and the rocks churning in the background and stuff like that. Despite the fact that we were in a vacuum area, you could hear all those sounds. So technically you shouldn't be able to hear any of those sounds, but of course we're operating under the assumption that you're just listening through the audio simulation. Hopefully CIG will give us in the near future the ability to turn that off. I know they've expressed an interest in doing that, but we don't have that yet, because I would like to float around in just pure silence sometimes. But the sound design was still very cool and kind of eerie too at times, which was kind of a juxtaposition to the music. So once the music was done and dusted, there was no music playing, and you could just hear the ambience of everything going on. And there was just kind of like this crunching sound of rocks in the background. Either that's meant to signify the machinery, refining these rocks, or the rocks of the asteroid field colliding and butting up against each other. But also, there's just these really kind of eerie, tonal, like industrial, almost like noises that kind of almost felt like a horror vibe. It was very scary. Maybe it's meant to give an idea of unease, considering that this location, Nyx, is supposed to be very close to a Vandal system. And in fact, actually, as you fly in, you can see that Vandal system off in the distance. Is ominous, angry red nebula in the distance, which is supposed to signify a Vandal system over there that is pretty close. And I took some time there. I was like probably out there for about 20 minutes just EVAing around. I left the pads and I started EVAing around the borehole and the areas around just in general, just to take a look. And it's really just incredibly beautiful, very serene. I can't wait for them to add VR. I know they've been saying they want to add VR, and I think this is going to be a good candidate for just immersing yourself in the world, because you can just sit there and just float in EVA and just look around. I had my track IR and I was just looking around and watching ships as they come and go as I was just lazily floating across the borehole, and it was just really, really good. There's a lot of beautiful detail. There's these little kind of like observation shacks and there's these little solar panel arrays, and they're just lovingly detailed. Probably a little bit more than what we're used to in terms of detail, because they know players can get pretty darn close to them. I know in the past other cities in the game don't have as much detail when you get very close to it. And I think the other benefit that really, really gives Levski a bonus is the fact that there's no restricted areas, so you can just go anywhere you want. It's really nice. Now, old Delamar had actual gravity, so you can actually spawn vehicles. And in fact, it was actually the perfect place to test the ballista back in the day when it first came out. And I have some pictures of that as well that you're seeing on the screen right now. But that's all gone, since it's all completely 0G now. You don't have any ability, but I don't really see too much of a loss there. It is still very interesting how much detail they have given us, though. And the freedom, I think, is really, really nice. I think that a lot of players are really going to appreciate this when they get it in their hands. So I made my way inside through the airlocks, and on the top level there, you have access to the cargo area. So this is where you can buy and trade commodities, as well as you can buy a couple of utility items like tractor beams. And overall, it just the vibe and design language of this area is all old Levski, just updated. It's very, very nice. Way better materials and stuff like that. Still run down, but it's not as run down as Pyro, for example. That's the best way to describe it. It's run down, but not Pyro rundown. Pyro is really bad compared to Levski in general. So that top area features the trading commodity area, but there's not really much else going on there. So you want to get further into the actual area of Levski, so you'll have to take the elevator. And this new elevator is essentially the tram system that we see on all the other landing sites. In the older version of Levski, it was an elevator that you had control over. It was manual. You selected the floors you wanted to go to, but this one has two elevators and they are completely automated now, and they're very fast. So you have to hop on it and then wait for it to take you to a floor. It's all predetermined. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell you which floor it's going to. It doesn't tell you which sub deck it's going to. So you have to just kind of peer out every time it opens to see if it took you where you wanted to go. And if you're not familiar with the place, you're going to be sitting on there going floor to floor to floor and just kind of getting off randomly and not knowing where you're at. So it's a little bit complicated, and I think it would probably benefit if it had like some kind of display that told you where exactly the next subdeck it was going to actually go to. That would probably be very, very beneficial. So the first subdeck I went to, the sublevel 01 as it's called, is where Mercy Hospital is located. It also has the hangars and the habs as well, and it's about what you can expect. There's not really anything too crazy to write home about here. It is everything you can expect. It's just all with Levski accoutrement. What's nice, though, is the new hangars actually are quite nice. They are the self-land hangars we already have in the game. And the main difference that they changed is the walls are no longer metal. They are using the asteroid's rock. So you have the same self-land design with the rock around it. And it kind of evokes the old asteroid mining base / hangar that we had way back in the day for the old self-land hangars. So it's kind of cool seeing that kind of almost be reimagined a little bit. It's really nice. So I did quite enjoy that. The area where you spawn the ships, the ASOP terminals, also features hangars there that you can go to as well. So you can go to any of the external pads. You can go to Teach's shop, which is the ship shop that's available there, as well as going to your pad and the docking ports as well. And Teach's is pretty nice. Teach's is mostly an industrial-focused shop. So you can get everything from moles, hullays, golems, prospectors, vultures, pretty much standard fare stuff. There's a couple other notable exceptions to it. You can get SRVs, terrapins, and stuff like that. There's even a Starfarer, if I recall. Very, very industrial focused, to say the least, which is pretty nice, because I think Levski could potentially be a nice starting point for some players, especially industrial focused players, since after all, it is in an asteroid belt. Now, the dangers of the Vandal, of course, are going to pose a threat as well, but still, being that it is in a nice kind of open asteroid field with tons and tons of rocks. I imagine a lot of players may want to start there. They want to start their industrial career there to kind of build up their capital. So interesting food for thought either way. Very, very nice. I like that shop. I didn't really have anything to write home about in terms of components. It's just the standard fare stuff you usually expect, but still very nice nonetheless. Moving on, we have sub-level 2, which is a deck lower, and that features the Grand Barter Market, which is the same locale that was in the original Levski as well. And things have been kind of moved around and adjusted, but everything is kind of where you expected. I mean, it's been a long time since I've been in old Levski, as far back as, I think it was 2019. I think it was the last time I remember visiting it. And it felt like I was back at home. I recognized everything. It's just things have kind of been moved around. It's like visiting an old friend's home. You recognize their home, but the furniture's been rearranged. You recognize the layout. It's just some things have changed here and there, and for the better, I would say. Now, of course, there is Conscientious Objects, which I love the name of that shop, by the way. Standard fare gun shop, really nothing special to write home about. They used to sell railguns there back in the day, not anymore. Obviously, since CIG took away a lot of the special weapons from all the shops, so it's kind of a standard fare shop. The only notable thing is it sold a Ripper SMG, that's really it. Moving on from that, they had Cafe Musain, I think is what it was called, and that was originally where Miles Eckhart used to be before they moved him to Lorville. And he's back there again. He's just sitting there, but last I checked, he was just chatting with an NPC, just sitting there. He didn't talk to you. He had nothing to say to me. But it was cool seeing him back again in Levski, where he originally was spawned into. It was very, very cool. Not much else to write home about the cafe itself. It's just very simple and straightforward. I didn't see any bartenders. Maybe they were turned off or anything like that. So I kind of just moved on from there. And I went to Cordry's, which is the old armor shop. And also, nothing too special there. It is the old Cordry's. It's been expanded a little bit more. I did notice that it had some of the extra colors that you could buy from some of the more basic armor sets. I know that a lot of the colors were kind of removed and put into loot pools, and then some were kind of eventually brought back in and put to different stations. This one had quite a substantial amount of colors for the basic armor set, so if that's what you're looking for, I guess that's kind of what makes it a little bit more special, but really nothing else to say about it, honestly. Now, the Grand Barter itself had a lot of stalls. There was one that caught my attention that had a t-shirt that said Big Berries, and it looked like a Big Benny shirt, but it said Big Berries, so I guess maybe it's supposed to be like a counterfeit shirt. I don't know if that's already in the game or not. I don't really go around buying clothes, but it did catch my attention that there was just this one stall selling a shirt called Big Berries. I don't know, it just kind of made me laugh. There's other clothing items you can buy from different clothing stalls, so all the little stalls that used to just have NPCs just standing there doing nothing back in the day now actually have little kiosks that you can go and buy stuff. Everything, like I said, from clothing to food, and the food is way better than the pyro food. So they have like actual bottled water and stuff like that. They had actual crews and stuff like that that you could buy, as well as utility items, so you can get like tractor beams and stuff like that. So useful stuff if you're about to go head out on an adventure, but really nothing too unique or crazy. Now, along the sides of sub-level 2, there is also the Boar, I think it was called like Boar something, I forgot what it was called. And then you had ventilation access as well too. And along those sides there you had Recco Battaglia, the old quest giver from back in the day. She was one of the early ones that we had, along with Miles Eckhart. And for some reason, she's always stuck with me. I don't know. I think what is really cool about Recco Battaglia is that she has the prosthetic leg. And she kind of has this kind of like mama bear kind of demeanor to her. And I don't know. I've always liked her as a quest giver, and I kind of missed her for, ever since she was taken out of the game when they got rid of Levski in 3.9, I think it was. So it was nice seeing her again. You can walk up to her. She turns around and she has a chat with you. And she'll ask you, hey, what brings you here? And you can say that, I'm here to buy stuff, or I'm here to just visit. And she'll have some commentary to say about that. I won't say exactly what she says, because I'd like you to go see that for yourself. But yeah, it's really cool just talking to her. I hope that she's going to be giving missions again soon. I did try some of the missions that were available in the Nyx system. They worked perfectly fine, but she wasn't offering any, so I didn't get a chance to actually try any of those. Maybe there's a later chain or something like that, or maybe it's for the dungeons that are coming out later. I don't know. Either way, again, really nice seeing her. She looks really cool. She's got a little bit more updates to some of her look, but for the most part, she's the same Recco Battaglia we all know and love, especially if you've been around as long as I have. Now, beyond Recco's little room, and her room is really cool, by the way. It overlooks the borehole. It's these beautiful big windows that you can see everything through. It's really cool. It's a nice spot. But beyond her room, there's the access to the vent shafts. You can go through there. There's not a whole lot. There's just NPCs walking around doing their thing. At the end of the vent shafts, there's some elevators that you can't access, you can't do anything with. I suspect that those elevators are going to be used for the upcoming dungeons that CIG had teased at SitCon. So when we eventually get those kind of instanced dungeons in our hands, it's probably going to be the start point, at least is going to be there. And my guess is because the proximity of Recco Battaglia, she's probably going to give us quests to do those dungeons there. That's just a guess, so we'll see how it goes. It seems like it fits. Like you can walk up to her, she says, hey, I got this thing I need you to do. Head down there to the vents, you head down through there, go through the elevators, and then you're now in that kind of dungeon area and you're doing quests for her. So it would make sense if they did it that way. We'll see. Either way, very, very cool, but not much else to write about that. I think it's all pretty well and done there. Then we have the final subdeck, which is the Foundry, which is pretty much like the Pyro Foundry in many ways, but it's a lot cleaner. I keep emphasizing this. They seem to really want to make sure that Levski is completely different from how Pyro looks. Pyro looks like an absolute dump, whereas Levski looks like a little bit more of a lived-in, better dump, I guess. I don't know. That's the best way to describe it. Levski is more like kind of old and worn down and very, very well worn, as well as since it's built into an asteroid, you can see rocks piling up there, you can see dust and stuff like that. In comparison, Pyro looks kind of more like a homeless encampment. I mean, that's really the best way to describe its look. The only other noticeable feature I noticed in the actual Foundry was there were some cool voiceovers for the PA. It was kind of like this automated safety system, which was really cool. It was a nice touch. There was also a control room where a bunch of NPCs were inside, and it looked like you can interact with some of the control panels in there, but they weren't working right. My suspicion is that those control panels are meant to be interacted with the NPCs, not the players. Either way, it was still cool seeing that little control panel there. Just a nice little touch they threw in there. And yeah, I mean, that really kind of encapsulates everything that I saw within the new Delamar / Levski area. And it's really, really nice. It's really beautiful. I tried all the missions and stuff like that. I tried each one. Some were a little bit bugged. Others were, for the most part, working perfectly fine. I even tried an interstellar cargo mission where I went from Levski all the way to New Babbage, and it worked perfectly fine. So it was nice to see that the missions were working too, despite it being a brand new area. So yeah, very impressed with how CIG is handling it. And while it doesn't bring a ton to the table, but regardless, it's still a nice foundation for what we're getting. There's none of the planets are available. Obviously, we're supposed to get the planets much later, like Nyx 1 and whatnot. But what's on offer is still really worth visiting and checking out. I think the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do some mining operations, and I just kind of want to see what I can find out there, see if there's anything interesting, and really explore a little bit more of the Glaciem ring, which Delamar is in orbit of. The other thing I noticed as well, too, is that Delamar does not rotate. It does not move, so it seems like it's kind of tidally locked with Nyx, or at least it just points in the same direction the entire time, so there's not really any day or night cycle, so the lighting is always going to be nice visiting that location. So either way, I'm going to take some more time to play with it. I do think probably this week we're going to get Wave 1, if not anytime within the next couple of days. Maybe even by the time you're watching this video, it has gone Wave 1. I don't know. It does have a lot of issues and some known issues. I didn't run into any crashes or anything like that, despite CIG saying that there were some crash issues with it. And yeah, I didn't have too many bad problems with it. But the main issue is that because it's missing its quantum marker, it's a little confusing for players to get to it. So I think they're probably going to want to clean that up first before they go Wave 1. Once they've gotten that in, probably by the next patch, I think they're going to just hit the button and go Wave 1. So keep an eye out for that. All right, folks, that's it for me today, talking about the Nyx system, Delamar and Levski, the brand new system and landing site coming to Star Citizen in Alpha 4.4. Hopefully I painted a vivid enough picture for you all to kind of get an idea of what to expect when it eventually goes into the PTU and then eventually into our hands in live. Let me know your thoughts below and what you think about Levski, and also let me know about like the instanced dungeons that are going to be coming out very soon. We know that that's the thing that was talked about. I know there's been a little bit of consternation and back and forth regarding that. And while this conversation is mostly here in the comments going to be about what Levski is going to bring to the table, I do want to actually hear your opinions on not just Levski, but also those changes, for example, those dungeons that are going to be coming in as well. Let me know your thoughts. But until next time, fly safe, keep those thrusters hot, and I'll see you all in the black.